The roots of wrestling date back to the sideshows of the 19th century, where average Joes would try to outshoot grapplers in the hopes of winning cash and adulation. The business soon evolved and it became a global attraction as the theatrical element was ramped up while the legitimate sporting side of it was downplayed. To keep the audiences coming back and to heighten the stakes, feuds were established and gimmick matches were slowly introduced. From the steel cage and the Texas death match through to contemporary gimmicks like Hell in a Cell and TLC, when a promoter struck gold with a match type, it could usually be relied upon to bring in some extra box office and often became part of a promotion's legacy. But not every experiment can be a success. For every TLC, there is a Judy Bagwell on a forklift match. For every Hell in a Cell, there is a Punjabi prison. Whether through a lack of foresight, bad timing, or elements beyond anyone's control, there are a bunch of match types that occurred once and then sank without trace, never to be tried again. I'm Adam Pachisi from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 wrestling match types that were never used again. Join us. Number 10, the Asylum. Dean Ambrose with his little fringe and sweaty vest and his silly face. Boy, was he a wacky character. A million miles removed from the brooding, violent Jon Moxley, Ambrose was a watered-down Brian Pillman who was eventually morphed into a quirky, cool guy with an edge. While feuding with Chris Jericho in 2016, Ambrose introduced several new elements to his character, most notably being friends with a potted plant called Mitch. After Jericho killed Mitch, their feud went up another level, and a new match was created to house their barbaric insanity, the Asylum. As a concept, the Asylum isn't bad. A cage match featuring a plethora of weapons attached to the top and sides where escaping wouldn't end things. The object of the match was for the participants to just wail on each other until one could get a pinfall or submission. The problem was there was just a bit too much going on and it felt a little, Russo. Look, either have a hardcore match or have a cage match. There was no need to combine the two. The bout itself wasn't terrible, but the crowd were dead and everything was overshadowed by a potted plant, like a dodgy sequel to The Little Shop of Horrors. Number 9, Armageddon Hell in a Cell. What's better than a Hell in a Cell match? That's right, a 6-man Hell in a Cell match. Despite numerous appearances in WWE video games through the years, the 6-man cell only happened once at Armageddon 2000. It was all Mick Foley's fault. The hardcore icon was commissioner at the time, and having seen WWE champion Kurt Angle weasel his way through matches against The Undertaker, Triple H, Steve Austin, The Rock, and Rikishi, Mick decided to throw all 6 under one roof and let the carnage unfold. Mr. McMahon hated the idea, trying valiantly to get all 6 competitors to drop out to no avail. Instead, the caveat was inserted that if anyone got injured, Foley would be fired. What we got was prime Attitude Era intensity. People were bleeding everywhere you looked, finishers were hit left, right, and center, and Vince turned up with a hay-filled wagon to try and tear the cell down. Just great stuff. The problem was that it was hard to know where to look, especially as Rikishi and Taker pummeled each other up on the roof before Fatu plummeted into the truck below. It was memorable, it was anarchic, but a one-on-one cell match usually works far better with a third of the effort. Number 8, Sumo Monster Truck Match. Throughout the ages, there have been many gimmick matches that have gone down in history. The Ric Flair vs. Kerry Von Erich cage match, for example. Shawn Michaels vs. Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell, another. But none hold a candle to the ultimate sporting contest. Hulk Hogan vs. the Giant in a monster truck match. Quite possibly the most 90s wrestling thing that ever happened, the monster truck match came about because Dungeon of Doom's rampaging rookie ran over Hogan's motorbike with a truck and laughed like a horse before driving off. Of course, the two signed on to have a monster truck battle, aka a boring sumo wrestling match featuring ridiculous giant cars. Hogan's had arms, Giant's looked like a spooky skeleton, and Eric Bischoff clearly spent far too much money on the whole thing. The match, if you can call it that itself, was just 5 minutes of trucks going forwards and backwards, and somehow ended with Hogan accidentally murdering a man when he pushed Giant off the top of Cobo Hall. How this got greenlit is honestly beyond me. Actually, wait, no it's not. It was 1995 WCW, where the big boys threw enough mess at the wall and hoped that some of it would stick. This mess clearly didn't. Number 7, the Piranha Death Match. Deathmatch wrestling is hardly sane at the best of times, but during its 90s heyday, it often went completely off the deep end. Hardcore pioneers FMW were the trendsetters with such weird match types like the grocery store deathmatch, electrified barbed wire exploding ring cage match, and the incredibly named barbed wire electrified dynamite pool double hell deathmatch. Looks nice on a marquee, doesn't it? But it was rival Big Japan Pro Wrestling that promoted the most bizarre deathmatch of all, the Yokohama Amazon River Piranha Deathmatch, or simply Piranha Deathmatch if you prefer. The object of the match was to submerge your opponent in a tank of ill-tempered piranhas, sort of like a casket match, but for the criminally insane. To make it more violent, there were barbed wire boards set up in corners of the ring, but who really cared? Because piranhas. In the end, Kendo Nagasaki got the win, and loser Mitsuhiro Matsunaga ended up with a small hole in his chest from where the little fishy fellas nibbled him like a big blood-soaked buffet. Due to the unpredictability of wild animals and the viciousness of the piranhas themselves, never mind the possibility that it could be easily conceived as animal cruelty, the Piranha Deathmatch never caught on. Number 6, the Doomsday Cage Match. Mid-90s pre-NWO WCW was just the oddest, most rubbish place. More cartoony than a Flintstones marathon, it was a company where seemingly every heel wanted nothing more than to end Hulk Hogan, though, to be fair, who could blame them? Heading into Uncensored 1996, the Alliance to End Hulkamania was formed. Comprising Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Meng, Barbarian, Lex Luger, Taskmaster, Z-Gangster, and a massive lad called the Ultimate Solution, they decided the way to destroy Hogan was by beating the Hulkster and best frenemy Randy Savage in a Doomsday cage match. 3 cages stacked on top of each other. The aim was to fight from the top to the bottom, where the match could be ended by pinfall. Each cage featured different opponents, but still, it was 8 against 2. It went about as well as you would imagine, and was, to put it kindly, an absolute mess of a match. For starters, the structure was by the entrance and bathed in weird lighting, so no one in the arena could actually see what was going on. And secondly, the storyline was woefully stupid. Hogan and Savage won the match, of course, thanks to booty man Ed Leslie giving them frying pans to use as weapons. What was I saying about the Flintstones earlier? The Triple Cage had several designs and appearances through WCW, but it was never deployed as woefully as it was here. Number 5, the Crybaby match. Wrestling is all about making your stars look great, whether they win or lose, or at least it should be. There is a victory in defeat when done right, and a spirited loss against a formidable opponent can turn your average Joe into a huge deal. The reverse is also true, and there are few better examples than when rookie underdog The Kid defeated Razor Ramon on Raw in 1993. It was a huge deal, and the rechristened 123 Kid became a player. Eventually, he was turned heel, because why not, and a renewed feud with Razor saw their roles reversed. With so much history between the two, there was only one suitable stipulation: the Crybaby match. Yeah, the Crybaby match. A regular match where the loser got their bum covered up with a big nappy, because nothing says tough wrestler like being made to look like an incontinent child. It was similar to the weasel suit matches that Bobby Heenan made famous. But Heenan was a cowardly heel manager, not a hot young wrestler who could have been groomed into a main eventer had they been presented and pushed differently. A weird, immature stipulation that could have only happened during the New Generation era, it's miraculous that the 123 Kid managed to come back from this. Number 4, the Last Rites match. No list of one-off match types would be complete without an appearance from everyone's favourite train-loving bro, Vince Russo. During one of his many spells in TNA, Russo oversaw a bonkers feud between Abyss and Sting, all centered around the fact that Abyss shot his own dad. What stakes could possibly end this immense piece of human drama? A Last Rites match. A match that saw plastic candlesticks adorning the turnbuckles and spooky graveyard crap littered around the ring. The object was to call a coffin down from the ceiling, put your opponent in it, then raise it back up. Absolute bollocks. The match itself was terrible, as having a chunky coffin in the middle of a small ring inhibited the wrestler's ability to move freely and easily, plus it was traditionally overbooked TNA tripe that saw polystyrene tombstones obliterated and Sting gushing blood from a candelabra shot. The fans obviously turned on the match, chanting "Fire Russo" so loudly and passionately that Mike Tenay and Don West had to practically scream on commentary to try to drown them out. Needless to say, the Last Rites match was never attempted again, and it has gone down as one of the worst matches in TNA history. And that covers some ground, let me tell you. Number 3, the King of the Road. Even though mid-90s WCW had morphed into a kid-friendly cartoonish wrestling federation, it still had one foot in wrestling and wanted to keep their remaining fans from the NWA days happy. Sounds like a good climate to promote an event called Uncensored then, WCW's annual Extreme pay-per-view where all matches were anything goes, including the King of the Road match. It pitted Dustin Rhodes versus the Blacktop Bully, better known as Demolition Smash. The two had been feuding for a while and it all led to this, a brawl in the back of Bully's 18-wheeler. The objective was to fight from the back to the front of the open-air hay-filled trailer, climb the cab and blast an air horn as the truck drove around public roads. The match itself was a weird concept, but was actually a half-decent brawl that saw both competitors blade a huge no-no at the time. Dustin, Bully, and road agent Mike Graham were fired on the spot for going against company policy, and the King of the Road match was never used again. Again, this was on a pay-per-view called Uncensored. If irony were made out of strawberries, WCW sure would have drank a lot of milkshakes. A blessing in disguise really, because if not for this match, we probably would have never gotten Goldust. Number 2, the Chamber of Horrors. The contributions of Dusty Rhodes to professional wrestling are immeasurable. His run as NWA champion and the mic work from that era influenced countless wrestlers, and his time on the booking committee produced gems like War Games and the infamous Dusty Finish. But not everything Dusty pioneered was gold, especially not the Chamber of Horrors match at Halloween Havoc 1991. The Steiners, Sting, and El Gigante taking on Big Van Vader, Abdullah the Butcher, Cactus Jack, and the Diamond Stud at the spookiest event of the year. Sounds great! So what was the stipulation? Simple. The 8 men battle it out in a big cage, aiming to lower an electric chair and kill one of their opponents for the win. Completely normal, that. As the raging climax drew near, Abdullah got Rick Steiner in the electric chair as Cactus Jack cheered and acted the fool by the all-important death switch. But oh no! Rick switched with Abdullah, and Cactus accidentally murdered his teammates, with Abdullah twitching, convulsing, and bleeding buckets as light sparks flew about the place. Abdullah stayed dead for a couple of minutes, then got up and beat up a load of weird ghosts. The strangest part? This was the opening match of the pay-per-view. I mean, really, where do you go from there? First ever serial killer 8-man tag in the main event? Number 1, the Kennel from Hell. We've talked at length here at Cultaholic about Big Boss Man and Al Snow's infamous rivalry from 1999. Disturbing, over the top, genuinely nasty, it wasn't a high point of the Attitude Era. From the horrible Pepper the Dog incident onwards, everything built up towards a huge blow-off, the Kennel from Hell. A Hell in a Cell surrounding a traditional blue-caged ring, with savage guard dogs patrolling in between, this was on course to be a violent bloodfest befitting such a heated feud, where the first to dodge all that carnage and escape would be victor. Then the bell rang and it all fell to pieces. The vicious guard dogs were anything but, and spent the majority of the match either pooping and peeing everywhere, or tracking down each other for a bit of naughty rumpy pumpy. Doggy style, obviously. Needless to say, it completely undermined the stakes of the match, and by the time Al Snow escaped and finally vanquished Big Boss Man, nobody cared. They were too busy laughing at dogs having a shag. I will admit that the double cage visual was sort of neat, but the columns of fresh dog turd that surrounded it just ruined it forever.